Introducing ZIna Umyn from Bordentown, New Jersey, who loves to paint the jumbled plants in the wild.
Hello, I'm ZIna Umyn, and I'm an artist who lives in Bordentown. And welcome to my first solo show called Wild and Wonderful at the Tulpehaking Nature Center. This watercolor was inspired by a doodle I did of a little ball, and it turned out to be like a whole bunch of moths in there. I did the sketch in ballpoint pen, and then I said I really need to explore this a little bit more. And as we go on walks at night, we see these amazing moths. I've painted the butterflies in my life, but never focused on moths. And moths to me are so mysterious and gorgeous, especially like the Luna moths. And that's in watercolor with some enhancements with gouache into it. And I wanted to have this glowy feel to it. And I think I captured it, and I had the best time painting it. And as soon as I did the doodle and I called it mothball, I said, you gotta paint it. So that's it for that one. Dark moth was done for just an exploration of the moth. I thought it was so interesting. And I used a ballpoint pen that if you put water to it or watercolor to it, it kind of runs. And I thought that effect was really cool. And I haven't done too many pieces with that particular ballpoint pen, but I love that purpley blue feel. And I think I captured like kind of the exotic feel of the mothball. That was fun to paint. This again was just like was playing with my paints and just exploring some shapes and floral shapes. And this painting here, Autumn Light, it was done when I was going on a walk with my late husband and just looking at the canopy of trees and the light filtering through. So this kind of, not kind of, but it reminds me of my husband Morris and our walks in Columbus, in the woods in Columbus, outside of Columbus. So again, it's painted with watercolor. I don't believe I have any gouache on there. It's all watercolor. And I just tried to, kind of rub out a few colors. You add it and subtract in paintings. This piece here was, it's called Fossils, and it's done in ballpoint pen again. It started out as like just a doodle on watercolor paper, and then I started to, it became just a bit of an obsessive drawing, I must say. You start something and then you start to get into more details, and I started and it was all from imagination, all from my head, So it was a lot of fun. This one here, Coming Storm, again, I had bought some, some really interesting brown inks, and I just wanted to see how they would react on the surface of the paper. And wet into wet, and this tree started to emerge, and I just, excuse me, I went with it. I went with the flow of the paint, and I started to add a few more details. And as a watercolor artist, we have to be very careful to go stop. You don't want to overwork stuff, and I have a tendency to add a lot of detail. And in some pieces, you have to know when to stop. This piece was Hopewell Farm, and this was a sketch that I did prior to doing a plein air painting. Again, I think I went over and beyond doing the sketch. I got into the details because doing a plein air painting, you really have to work really quickly. And I wanted to do the sketch first, so I wouldn't be like, floundering there, floundering, whatever. So, but I had fun doing it, and I think it really captured the light. It was in the afternoon, and like the shadows were falling on the fields, and it was interesting. I enjoy painting, so I kept saying I had a lot of fun doing it, because I do. I don't see the point of painting something that's going to be painful. At times we're exploring something, and it could be more of a challenge, but it should still be exciting and fun. these two small pieces, and again, they were just little landscapes, imaginary landscapes. There was just a tree, and a tree in a storm. I added the moon in there, and I have like the moon in a few pieces. And I said to myself, it could be called a nocturnal set or something. And this too, just started playing with my paints, and again, they're both watercolors. I did add a bit of white jelly pen to that. All those little dots in there, I added the jelly pen instead of wash on a brush. I added the jelly pen dots, which I love. I love the jelly pen. These two pieces were done when I went on a trip with a friend in an RV to a place in Pennsylvania called Ohio Pile. And we were staying in a campground there, and there was a beautiful lake there. And I just sat, and we were there for 3 days. I brought all my paints with me, so I was just having fun, sitting under the tree. And these were done during the day, but this turned out to look like an evening shot, and I kind of whatever, it works. And this, I was right underneath the trees here, and I love the turquoise glow of the sky. And I added a few things here. I enhanced a few things. These branches weren't there in the actual setting, but I said, thinking needs a little bit of balance there. And that's watercolor with a little bit of gouache. This piece here is just a lovely fennel. When I lived in Columbus, I had a huge garden, and I just love to eat fennel. I love the way it looks. I love the way it smells. And I had this plant that was just like glorious fennel. So I went in the garden, I pulled it out of the ground, and I said, I don't want to just clean it up now. I put it on a table in my studio. And I said, you have to paint this, so I photographed it. But I worked from the fennel as a still life, right on a table with all the dirt there. I put like a backdrop of white paper or a board, whatever, in the background to isolate. And it was just like those fronds were like feathers. So I wanted to I just wanted to bring to light how beautiful maybe just a carrot out of the ground or fennel out of the ground is. And as an artist, I want to share that excitement and that feeling of wow, this is so cool. I want everybody else to think, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't see fennel in that light, in that way. These two, again, are just imaginary landscapes. And again, I added a moon and a big, I drew a circle in there, and I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And a lot of times, as a painter, especially if you're doing something imaginary or something abstract, you don't quite know where you're going to go when you start. But in the middle of it, I kind of oh yeah, there's a forest in there, but I added the element. And again, I went with my, I drew with gouache with a brush, and then I went back with the jelly pen, and I added a few lines. And they're both watercolor. Yeah. And I've started to mount the watercolor because obviously it's paper. It's on paper. I mount them I mount the paper on cradle board, and then I varnish them. And I think it isolates it without having a frame. I think it stands out really strongly, especially for small pieces. I don't want to be framing all these tiny little paintings. It's kind of nice just on a cradle board. This piece called In Flight, again, is a watercolor and gouache. And I painted it because one of my students, Jen Steffi, she was a wonderful artist. She brought a box one day with a whole bunch of feathers and nests and a hawk wing. And she said it was found by a friend of hers in a field. So and it was wrapped in this white paper. And I put it in my studio, put it on a table, and I kind of arranged the objects into a still life of beautiful things I love to paint. I have a whole collection of birds' nests. And I showed them to my students. I said, look guys, you have to explore this, it's so beautiful. I'm just in awe of the design and creation, in nature. And God is the best designer. And originally I didn't have the hawk in flight there, but it needed something, so I simplified the background, made it slightly darker, and put the hawk, and therefore it became in flight. I painted this I was inspired by just a local stream, and it's pretty close to the Abbott Marshlands. And in all the streams that we see as we go on walks, stop and look at the reflections. You see the surface of the water, and underneath the water you see all the pebbles. And that's what kind of got me. And it was my challenge in painting it, seeing the pebbles below and the surface of the water. So I painted this in watercolor, and I enhanced a few parts with gouache. Go. This particular piece I painted in acrylics. And I love natural forms that turn into a pattern of sorts. And I just love all the floral patterns. And I had a black and white sketch of a paisley design. And I said, it would be so beautiful to enlarge that particular design and start embellishing. So that's why I added like leaves and flowers. And in here, I just a suggestion of a pineapple and things just emerging. And because I like to embellish the surface, I added some gold paint in some areas, and I also added some oil pastels on the surface to bring out some of the colors, to make them a little bit more vibrant and intense. And I just, as you can see, the detail is there. At times it's just a lot of fun to get lost in the detail. And as we go on our walks in nature, find the patterns, look for those patterns. When you see a fiddlehead fern, it has a beautiful curl. And so all this stuff is out there if you just look a little bit more closely. These wonderful insects, because I just love the color of their wings. And you can find all kinds of amazing insects right in the Abbott Marshlands. You go for a walk and it's all around you, and you hear them buzzing. And I just love all the colors and the textures. And I think it would be fun on one of your walks to explore that yourself, to go looking for that particular insect and say, oh, it's not just a bug, it's something gorgeous and beautiful.